Happy Tuesday evening, Bills Mafia. That red light is on, which means this week's episode of Under Review is officially live. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Joe DeRosa, and you can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. Joining me tonight is Cover One's film aficionado and friend of the show and show neighbor, Mr. Anthony Prohaska, and we are going to be talking about our favorite performances from the NFL Combine and whether these players could be potential fits for the Buffalo Bills. We will also be going over the very surprising Ryan Bates trade that occurred last night. So I appreciate you all so much for being here. And without further ado, let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
And once again, everybody, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your view. If you could do me a favor, and please drop a like on this video. Tell your friends about this show if they don't know about it and are Bills fans and love punchable faces, because mine is certainly punchable. So therefore, I think they would like me. And I also, real fast before I do my introduction, this is great, Ralph Wilson Sr. Thank you for this. Fastest combine and slowest podcast. Well, you see, here's the thing. I kind of like waiting a few minutes before we go live, but also Anthony and I were getting into a conversation about baseball and everything in between. And
it's my fault. I take blame. It's me. I sincerely, it's me. I apologize.
But I appreciate the sentiment because we empathize a lot with our baseball team. So it leads to a lot of shared interest, even though we root for the polar opposite franchises. But anyways, Mr. Anthony Prohaska, thank you so much again for being here. I always appreciate your time. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you, having me on. I always enjoy stopping by here. You and I DM with good rapport, and we have good rapport on the show. Last couple times you've asked me, I haven't been able to with scheduling stuff, but I think you asked me over the weekend, and my Tuesday was good, so I'm pumped to do this, and then take a little pee break, and then get ready for the Skies coverage at 9 o'clock. So a little bit of a marathon, but I'm pumped.
I'm going to write in my notes and at least 15 minutes early before his show starts so that he has time to go before we come back. But no, dude, your insight is always appreciated. I love talking with you. And after the Combine, we saw some really fun performances, some surprises, some guys that we knew were going to test well, but we were still like, holy crap, did you see that? Like, It was a really, really cool experience. And a lot of guys that I think that are on at least the Bills radar or Bills fans radar that we're going to be talking about today. But before we get into that, I know Bills Mafia witnessed a trade go down yesterday. Well, technically, the new league year hasn't started yet. And kind of a surprising one with Ryan Bates getting sent to Chicago for a 5th-round pick. So, I'm not like punching the earth for this one. And I know it's not the biggest earth-shattering trade, but it's something. So, Ant, let me just hear your thoughts on this trade in general, whether it's indicative of something in the future or if you think this is just to stack more draft capital.
I think right off the bat, there's a chance this is now another day 3 pick that the Bills have. And Bean seems to be hoarding day 3 picks. So in a perfect world, I would love the idea of, with how much quality there is in this draft class, especially on day 2 and early day 3, I would love the idea of trying to package some of this day 3, capital and amassing as many rounds 2 through 4 picks as possible. So maybe that's on the horizon. Maybe it's indicative of a bigger move. But, my initial focus and immediate reaction, oh, what's up, RJ? Appreciate you. Yeah, a little double duty. But my initial focus and reaction was, the Bills' offensive line last year was so healthy, like in an unprecedented fashion. Like, you do not see starting fives stay together that long. And you didn't even see so-and-so went down for a half a game. It was like, nope, like pretty much every single rep that was meaningful was played by this starting 5. So the depth wasn't really tested. But the Bills had 2 really good depth offensive linemen in David Edwards and Ryan Bates. David Edwards is a UFA. We saw him get worked in with those 6 offensive lineman sets, which did well in Buffalo this year. But Ryan Bates was such a true super sub for me. Oh, that's a good comment from Steve. I thought Bates was a super sub, like somebody who can play at center, who can play both guard spots, and who if you're dire enough, he could pop out to a tackle. Like, it's not ideal, but he could still give you at least something there. He was a true super sub, and he and David Edwards provided a lot of depth and I think a good safety net that the Bills didn't really have to test last year. So I was already kind of sad to see David Edwards be a UFA. Maybe he comes back. And again, getting a 5th round pick, cool. I am a little disappointed to see Ryan Bates go just because of that safety net that he provided literally at all 3 interior spots. I guess this guarantees, not necessarily guarantees, but means Mitch Morse is coming back, which I love. But yeah, I am a little disappointed to see Bates go. He was a good dude, and he was functional at 3 important spots.
Yeah, and this is something about the trade, and I agree with you on that. That definitely is concerning to me. Giving up quality OL depth, I think having the luxury of Ryan Bates is exactly what it is. It's a luxury. It's not something that most teams get to have, someone of his caliber with the ability to kick to multiple positions and play them pretty well on your roster, getting paid a contract and having, that luxury of if Torrance or Morse or, Edwards or anybody on this line could go down, I trust him to at least fill in. Whether he's good or not, to be seen in a game, but he can fill in. He's a body for that role. But what I think this also is, and I know that Judge has said this, I know a few people have said this, Ryan Bates wants to start. Ryan Bates wants to play. When we matched his contract offer from the Bears and brought him in, to me, it indicated that the Bills had plans for him to maintain that role or even start should maybe Torrance not be ready, Mitch Morse possibly going down. A lot of different paths for him to get back into the starting line where even if it is a bit pricey for a utility role, it's still a guy you can trust, knows your scheme, knows how to protect Josh. And there you go. That's someone that you can plug in. But Ryan Bates is good enough to be a starter in this league. And I think going to Chicago, they were a team that's been interested in him in the past. They're a team that obviously wanted him and tried to sign him to a contract and lost out to Buffalo. And Brandon Beane knew that. And I think it's an equal parts trying to accumulate draft capital for the sake of moving up, but also doing right by your player and being able to get him into a spot where he could be a starter, have success in the league, make his money, and ultimately help a young Chicago Bears franchise that right now has potential to really emerge and become the new big cheese on the scene. So it's kind of, I love using that term big cheese. I don't know why I've been using it so much lately, but it's something that I've wanted to use. So, and I mean, let me ask you just a little more as far as the 5th round pick that they acquire. I know you touched upon it a little bit, but talk to me about your thoughts about maybe where this pick could end up helping the Bills, maybe if they want to make a trade in this draft, or maybe if it's something that you think they back pocket and literally just use face value.
I would be okay if they sit there and back pocket with face value. With how deep this wide receiver class is, I still think you can get like a fun, like a more advanced type of Justin Shorter type prospect on day 3, especially sitting there in round 5. But there's going to be some interesting safeties that are still available there in round 5. I wouldn't mind throwing another 5th round pick at offensive lineman. Like you always need offensive line depth or a corner. Like you can never have too many corners and offensive linemen. And as Pete says there, I think that's the real one to watch too, right? Like, with the 5th round picks that they have, I think potentially moving up into the back end of day 2, like acquiring some more day 3 or round 3 capital, or again, or even maybe even early day 3 in terms of like round 4 action. I'm expecting something. I don't know if it's going to be the minor draft trades where it's like, oh, they moved up 2 or 3 picks in the 1st round to go get this guy and they gave up a 5th or they gave up a 4th or something like that. Or if it's something more significant where they're packaging multiple picks, who knows too, maybe they're thinking about packaging some stuff and going after Cortland Sutton. I know that's been like, I'm still kind of on that train. I have been a little bit since last offseason. I think at the end of the day, what's fun is it gives you a multitude of options to talk about. And like worst case scenario is they just sit and pocket it and use it in a deep draft. Cool.
Yeah.
But then you get some fun options. Do they go and get an NFL ready player now? Do they use it to acquire more premium capital? Like there's some fun opportunities. And I think what happens in free agency will go a long way if they can fill a lot of these, because they don't have a ton of holes, but they have areas that need refinement and like more stockpiling. If they can address a lot of that in free agency, I think the odds of them, trading up more in the draft just increases with every single free agent that they bring in. If they can get to the point where they can really go after best player available in a multitude of fashions, that's where all this draft capital really starts to become exciting because they could do a lot of things with it.
1,000%. And I think what I kind of view this as is I don't even think their plan is set in stone yet. Like, I don't think that the Buffalo Bills I'm sure they're discussing potential paths. Maybe, hey, if free agency goes this way and we could bring these people in, we're going to try and do this because
But it's all based off that first part you said. It's like, it's based off of what happens here. They can go in all these different offshoots, but they're waiting until they get to that free agency piece to decide which avenue they go down.
Yes, 1,000. I'll even say 1,000,000% now,
Oh,
because I'll
wow,
just
that's
keep
high.
I'm going to try and keep expanding my zeros in agreement until I run out or I just mess up. So that'll probably be the next one.
I
But
like
I
that.
think their path isn't set in stone yet. I can be pretty confident in saying that they still have ways to go with their free agency to really prove how they're going to attack this. But like you said, worst case scenario, you just added another pick in a draft where you're really trying to fortify your depth, trying to get younger in the midst of a lot of cap turnover. Having more assets is significantly better than not having enough. So even if this does end up being just another 5th round pick that you just pocket, you just carry it with you, and then maybe by then you're looking at like maybe an offensive lineman or a cornerback or maybe a running back. I don't know if they're really, touted ones will fall that far. But I do think that just it's always good to stack picks. I don't know if Brandon Beane is thinking trade up, but I do think, like you said, free agency will be telling. And as far as the Cortland Sutton trade potential, because nothing has happened, I don't know anything. I just wanted, because we brought the name up. Like, how nice would it be to just kind of scratch that itch and get a boundary receiver that way with one of your extra picks, and then you just have more flexibility in this draft? Like,
That would be great. Like, for that to happen, I really like Noah Brown from Houston. Like, with his fit, it would be awesome to have, like, in a perfect world, they get that boundary receiver or just like an actual starting caliber receiver in free agency. It doesn't have to be, Calvin Ridley, but some like legitimate starting guy who, like, you know what? Okay, that dude can get reps. Maybe the upside isn't there, but this dude gives us a solid baseline or floor. I'd love to do that at receiver, and I'd love to do that at safety. Like, I'd love to bring in a Brandon Jones from Miami. Again, I still have, some love in my heart for Jeremy Chin, although there are some warts that Eric and I talked about in the film room a couple weeks ago. But even just someone, like Brandon Jones on a 1 or 2 year cheapy type of like 2 to 3, maybe 4 million AAV type of contract. So where it's like, you know what? Now we don't have to go safety early. Right. Now we don't have to go wide receiver early. Now we don't, like, especially with how much defensive line help they need. And that type of free agency help is going to be tough because you're looking at more. Those dudes cost a pretty penny. Like, you're not finding, like, you can find a decent enough wide receiver for like $5 million a year and get the job done. Even safety, to a degree, you can do that. It's hard to do that with defensive tackle. It's hard to do that with edge. And that's awesome from David. David is a handsome guy. He knows something about handsome guys, so I take that very sincerely. But yeah, you're going to have to address this defensive line, and I think a lot of it needs to happen in the draft. Because again, even if you do it in free agency, you're still probably looking at dudes coming in on 1 or 2 year deals, which means next offseason and the offseason after, we're probably having a very similar conversation to the conversation we're having right now, which is like, oh boy, what happens? Like, we only have 4 defensive linemen. What's going on? And then I'm assuming Greg Rousseau stays, but I don't know what happens if something goes sideways after his 5th year option. Like, what happens if he doesn't? Then all these potential dominoes start to fall. So there's a lot that just kind of addressing those baselines in free agency, it could go a real long way. And that's a great point too, of just pocketing the fifths. Cool. Like, the Bills have done so well in getting like a lot of blood from the day 3 stone. I'm all right kind of using them, but it's fun to kind of imagine the possibilities.
I love where Steve's head is on this comment. We'd love to see the Bills trade back with Washington and get 36 and 40 and use the 8 picks in round 2 to 5. Like,
I'm all about that.
To fill major holes and get younger. I'm not even just all about it. I think it's genuinely possible because you're looking at the end of the first and you think about who's realistically going to be on the board, right? Especially after this combine, which we didn't forget. We're going to get to it, I promise. But
keep in mind too, the guys available usually that you're getting at the end of round 1 are usually round 2 graded players. Yes. Like, maybe there's someone that fell through, but you're probably looking at a dude who has a 2 grade.
There could be 3 receivers that the Bills are eyeing that are around 2 grades. And when you're picking at pick 28, like that's to be expected. And this has been kind of the case for each of the past few years. So they could very realistically trade back if they don't like what's on the board, or if they feel that there's a plethora of 2nd round talents at those positions that could cause them to go back. Because why go up if you don't need to go up, man? Like, I do think that a lot of their main targets are probably going to go, or their stock might have fallen a little bit because of the combine, but we'll get to that one. But the final point I'll make on this, and then we'll get to the discussion, is Brandon Beane has proven in each free agency, no matter what the cap situation is, no matter what ends up happening, he wants to allocate resources evenly. Last season, I felt they did a great job of addressing depth at every position. It was running back, it was D-line, it was secondary, it was everything. I don't think he's the pure type, at least right now, given how cap strapped they are and how limited their finance is, to go crazy on just trying to throw it all at one position, because you have to get veteran depth. You have to rely on guys that have experience, at least in my opinion. So I do foresee them maybe attacking it evenly and going for 1 to 2 year contracts, like you said, on defensive line, or maybe trying to recreate the magic they made with Poyer and Hyde and finding 2 savvy free agents that they could plug into that role, which is why I know, like, whenever Eric and you and anyone talk about Gilman from LA, I kind of think of like that as being like the, oh my God, that's our Jordan, like that's our Poyer, that's our Hyde.
Like Gilman and Brandon Jones are like the 2. They just feel like a Poyer or Hyde move. Like someone you're just like, oh, okay. And then it's like, oh, well, actually, no. Hyde, I think, was like, oh, cool. Poyer got signed and everybody was like, who?
Yeah.
So, but Gilman and Jones carry a little more name to them. And especially with how they pick. This is an interesting point, too, with safety, not to get us too sidetracked, but like, you have to find someone who also pairs well with Jordan Poyer. That's been a little knock for the Jeremy Chin. Again, even though I'm in that Jeremy Chin camp, that's been one of the knocks for me with that fit is you have some positional redundancy with Chin and Poyer. Yes, Chin is bigger and faster and still has like a lot of range to him because of how fast he is. But in an ideal world, he's playing more of that Poyer role. Granted, Poyer and Hyde were interchangeable, but you want Poyer more around that box, more in that apex, blitzing, coming forward, all that kind of monster man stuff. That is where Chin is. So yeah, the idea of like Gilman coming in, again, you also have to look at it through the lens of how much they're going to cost. Gilman's not going to be expensive. Brandon Jones isn't going to be expensive. These are dudes that fit the scheme, fit alongside Jordan Poyer. And then when you look at Sean McDermott's track record of getting every drop of blood from a defensive back stone, whether they're a free agent cast off or a day 3 pick, it's interesting.
Yeah. So we are going to see what they end up doing in the draft. But of course, before the draft comes free agency, and that's going to shape a lot of things. And my thing about some of the wide receivers when we get to the combine discussion on this list is I see a lot more value in them if you can attack boundary receiver in free agency. Because if you can at least wipe away the need to have like a size mismatch or a size presence there, then you can get fun with some of these guys that are coming out in this draft. So let's pivot over to our combine discussion. And as I do that, I want to thank all of you for being here. There's like 617 people here, which is freaking cool. That's far and away the most I've ever had on a live show. So thank you, Anthony. I appreciate you drawing in the hype on this one. And I see 619 Rey Mysterio wrestling. It's tying all together. You see what's happening here? It's a beautiful thing.
It's all full circle.
But let's talk about the combine. There were some really fun performances. There were some underwhelming ones, but I want to take this position by position based on our current needs, at least what we see as needs for the Buffalo Bills, and just talk about some of the standouts. Maybe if you could see them being a fit for the Bills, and then maybe if you want to talk about the ones that underwhelmed you, if that should really hurt their stock or if they just didn't test well. So let's start with wide receiver. Anthony, let me hear them. Who do you got as far as people you loved and didn't love?
I'll start with Ladd McConkey, your boy. I don't think he's slow. I was expecting him to run in like the mid 4.4s. Like I thought 4.45 was solid, like somewhere between like 4.44 and 4.47, like, which is fine considering how good of a route runner he is. But for him to pop into the 4.3s, and again, I know someone might sit there and be like, yeah, but it was like 4.39, so it was barely under. It does not matter. Like once you are sub 4.4, you are sub 4.4. So him running that time, I thought was a very strong piece for him. And then of course, like a lot of these guys, I think their draft stock move or who I was impressed with, a lot of it was just 40 related because a lot of the guys, I've watched so many of these guys on tape, how they performed in the combine is kind of how I anticipated they were going to perform at the combine. Like I expected certain guys to test well, but McConkey exceeded my expectations. Even AD Mitchell, the other receiver from Texas that is not Xavier Worthy for people looking at it like that. Just for him to run a 4.35, I didn't know what he was going to run because his routes at times are often like lazy in his stem, like, or he's just so smooth that you kind of don't know what he's going to do. So to watch him kind of go full tilt and run that 4.3, Xavier Worthy, similar boat, setting the combine record at a 4.21. Like, oh yeah, and RJ's comment is spot on with that Sting match was ridiculous. Yeah, Darby Allin going off the ladder and going through that plane of glass.
That was crazy.
I
didn't even watch the full match, but I saw that clip and I'm like, oh, man. I hope they cut him a nice check for that match. Apparently he only needed 12 stitches. So like it wasn't even that bad. I thought he needed like stitch surgery with how bloody his back was, but that was absolutely wild. But yeah, so I think from a 40 time perspective, I saw one of the other comments earlier. I think Xavier Legette helped himself a little bit there. With what he, how he tested. But I expected that a little bit again. Like
dude is fast. He's big. He's strong. He's baby AJ Brown. Like, he looks great. Like, he is the guy who shines at the combine with how he looks and how athletic he is. Like, this is a type of event that's tailor-made for him. And even Ricky Pearsall too, like running a 4.41, like almost coming in at sub 4.4, given how, again, like how good of a route runner he is. Brian Thomas doesn't crack that list for me because I expected him to run a 4.3. Like, he did what I thought he was going to do. Right. Big guy, runs fast. Like, he came in an inch shorter than listed, but basically 6'3", 209 pounds, and he ran a 4.3, 340 or a 4.34. Like, but I expected that from him. But at the end of the day, a lot of strong performances from the wide receiver grouping, which is good for the Bills because it kind of creates some moving and shaking.
And moving and shaking, wheeling, and also dealing. I'm pretty much in lockstep with a lot of the names you mentioned. I'm glad you left off with Ladd. I don't know if that was a treat for me or not, but okay, good. Cause I'm full steam ahead on Ladd McConkey. I've been a fan of his since I watched him for the first set, but I'm all over it, man. I would be elated. And this is what I was talking about when we talked about boundary guy that you get in free agency that's good enough to hold it down. Because even though he can play on the outside, but also play on the inside, you're not relying on Ladd McConkey or forcing yourself to find someone with size if you don't like how these size guys work in your offense. Ladd is a dude that I would plug in anywhere. I'd run motion with him. I'd give him some free releases. I put him in bunches. I would do anything I freaking want with this guy in my offense, and I expect him to get open. And I was so happy to see him kind of exceed expectations on his 40 because he proved he's got the speed. He's not just a guy who's like, as much as we value polished route running and as much as we love route runners, someone that also has the speed to boot. So if you're worried about him getting a step on someone, whether that's someone who's playing soft press, he can do it. So give me that. I loved him. I love watching him in the gauntlet because he ran a super straight line and just, you could see that precision and just almost looked like he's played this game for 30 years and has been in the NFL for 10. Like, this guy is a pro ready guy. He's someone that I think if you're not familiar with him, well, I see 657 right now on our chat. If you're not familiar with Ladd McConkey, get familiar. This guy is awesome. I hope the Bills take him. I don't know if they like him the way I like him, but seeing his combine performance pushed me over the edge, and I was already pretty much on that cliff to begin with. Next one, again, I'm not surprised that he had a good day, but Xavier Worthy, I mean, just the spotlight on him. I love Xavier Worthy. I don't know why there is a subset of football fans that are like afraid of their team drafting him now because he set the 40 record. I have seen this on Twitter. I don't know if you have, Ant, but I have I've seen people actually be kind of off-put by the fact that he ran the record time because they've had shades of John Ross and other 4.2. There was like a chart of like 4.2 runners.
You know, no, too, like, but that's actually fair because there were a couple people who were like, I was posting stuff, and people coming in and be like, oh, well, yeah, but Worthy's all speed. He can't run good routes. And so I'm just like, okay, like I'm copying link for like the 75 Xavier Worthy clips that I have being like, he's a good route runner. Here's this one, here's this one, here's this one, here's this one. I think people see the speed and just think one trick pony, which is funny. Because I think Troy Franklin is a one-trick pony, but people do the opposite and think he's this complete receiver that can do it all, which is weird. Like, it's funny how draft narratives get started. And I think a lot of it, the first thing that comes into your mind usually sets your bias. And if you're not watching tape or you're not following these guys year-round, whoever you listen to, you can listen to, you know, whoever in January or February, and if they tell you, hey, Timmy Jones is an awesome route runner, even if Timmy Jones sucks, in your mind, you're thinking, well, Timmy Jones is an awesome route runner, and that sets your bias and your table for the entire draft season. And I think we've gotten a lot of bad narratives for this wide receiver grouping.
Yeah, and I think people are just afraid of pure speed because they view speed as one trick pony. Now, granted, I've had my thoughts on Brian Thomas Jr., but I based that off of what I watched of him, where I felt like he was kind of shoehorned into one role, and I wasn't sure. Do you have a differing opinion on Brian Thomas Jr., like as far as his route tree or as far as him as a prospect?
So this is one that I always thought was interesting because so many people were putting Franklin over Brian Thomas, and I see them both kind of being in a similar situation, but vastly different for a couple of reasons. Both guys primarily have just won with like athleticism or speed. And in Franklin's case, it's just speed. With Brian Thomas, again, 6'3", 209 pounds, runs a 4.33, but also has the ability to kind of dunk on dudes a little bit at the catch point. And I think he could lean into that skill set even more in the NFL. what's nice about Thomas is you do have the size and you do have the speed, and he shows some other traits as well. Like he'll run a hitch and you'll see him sink his hips and have some of that lower body flexion and flexibility, which I think is nice. He just needs to be coached up in his route tree. Like both he and Troy Franklin. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry to crush the draft dreams of Timmy Jones. I loved him though. He was great on tape, just so bad at the combine.
Yeah.
Like Thomas's tree just isn't there. A lot of his tape, again, and I don't mean this negatively, is like I said earlier, big guy runs fast, which is why you're drafting him. You're drafting him because you can't teach size and you can't teach speed. You can't coach someone to be 6'3", 209 pounds and run a 4.3 40. And honestly, he probably could put on about another 5 pounds and still be okay. Like he could be there like 214, 215, still running a 4.3, being 6'2". And then if you can coach up that route tree, then he gets really exciting. Like I think his ceiling, I think his floor is lower than several other dudes at the top. But I think like if we're comparing him to Franklin, for example, I think his ceiling is so much higher because he has the size to go. I mean, well, one, he's faster than Troy Franklin and he's like 34 pounds heavier, but you have the size with the speed. So there's, even though he's a work in progress still, you have more things you can put or hang your hat on early on while you develop and coach the rest of the finer points.
And that's the beauty of kind of this draft. And I've knocked on Brian Thomas Jr. a bit for that reason, because I'm concerned about how kind of raw he is, how kind of one-styled he is. But you can coach that up. And if you trust the Bills to do it, then by all means, because the traits are there. I've never knocked his speed. I've never knocked his size. And his combine was excellent. I mean, his vertical was excellent. His 40 was what you'd expect it to be. But I think if you actually trust them to coach him up and you want someone that you think, well, he's a little bit more of a project, but you might see this as the archetype to replace Diggs eventually when he goes, then this is a guy that I think you could pass that off to. And I will say, I want to watch him again, because I feel like I was so boxed into the idea of him being a one-trick pony that I didn't see the potential for other things that he could do. And there were some points where he flashed on things that weren't just go routes or post routes, but like screens and having the ball in his hand and yards after catch and maybe some things that go over the middle of the field. And watching him at the combine, I saw some really nice drills he had where he was able to kind of hitch and look really sharp doing it. And maybe you could flush that out. So,
and you have to, because you're just not gonna. You're not going to win with size and speed only in the NFL. Because guess what? Everybody else is big and fast too. Like, unless you're like a unicorn and a one-of-one like Randy Moss, who'd be like, nah, bro, I'm just going to run go routes all day and you can't stop it. Like, okay, well, we can't stop it. It is what it is. Like, you're not going to out athleticism and outspeed everybody in the NFL. It's just, you can't win that way. It's something cool to have a good foundation on. But otherwise, not to scare anybody, but that's where the John Ross piece comes in. Like, you can be a flyer and not win deep because you don't understand how to sell routes. You don't understand how to operate with deception. And even though dudes may run a 4.4 and you run a 4.2, they're on you downfield because you don't know how to play ball. And that's the thing when we take it back to Ladd McConkey. And yes, I'll talk about him again. Like, this is why I love him as a prospect. It isn't just because of the traits, because the dude is 5'11". It's because he sells himself so well and has such suddenness and such an understanding of how to really dominate people, especially when you get to the second level. And he's talking about having a safety on him and maybe needing a head fake or pivot or shimmy some sort of way to get that extra step. Like, that tactician style, that understanding is why I don't give a damn if this dude is 5'7". Like, he's so developed as a route runner that it offsets some of the concerns I have. And I'm going to tie that into this comment from Roy Collins, which says, does Worthy's weight concern you, though? I mean, sure. Yes, because I guess he's not the heaviest dude in the world, but also what are you asking him to do in the Bills offense? Is he going to be put in a position where he's going to be trucked, or are you going to have him run deep, or are you going to have him kind of in a sense where he's playing a more like Diggs protect your body style where you're trying to get out of bounds? Like, how does it work? I'm not really that worried. I almost said that worthy about it. Oh my God. That would be funny if you planned it like that. I like it. Would have been a good pun. Now I'm mad I didn't, but I'm not worried. I know he has injury history, but I'm not really overly concerned. Like, Ant, does that worry you at all? I mean, it's always got to be like in the back of your mind, even for myself. I was a big Tank Dell supporter last year. I like Josh Downs. Jordan Addison was my wide receiver 1. All three of those dudes were outliers in one way or another from a size and frame perspective. And I think the performances of those three dudes went a long way towards the confidence that I have in Xavier Worthy being able to translate to the next level. But it's still a fair, like, I love Xavier Worthy. He's my wide receiver 4. He's been my wide receiver 4 for quite a long time. But I do have that concern in the back of my mind. Now, I also want to say, too, like he weighed in at 165 at the combine. I would not be surprised if that is not his playing weight. Again, I don't want to like put anything out there. It wouldn't surprise me if he dropped that weight to run that 4.2 140. Now, I don't think that's bad because if he weighs in at 175, you're still looking at a dude who's probably running a 4.3, like low 4.3s. Like, dude is going to fly no matter what. So I think his playing weight is closer to 170 or above. And again, for me, it's his speed and it's the route running and how he wins. He gives you such a high floor and then a bit of a ceiling on top of it as well. But to your point, it is how you use him. Like, are you sending him over the middle into areas where he can get murked, or are you using him to stretch the field? Are you using him as more of a slot and a Z movement type of guy, creating mismatches, letting him find that space, and really taking advantage of his skill set? I wish he was bigger. And again, I recognize the success that these smaller frame dudes had last year and how much I banged the table for them, but it still has to be in the back of your mind, because until we see this become a consistent year-over-year trend, these guys are still outliers in a variety of ways at these positions.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, it's not to say that I won't cringe if he gets drafted by the Bills and gets tackled in the open field. I mean, if he gets hit hard, size can only help you so much as far as how it's going to protect you. If you are 6 foot and you weigh 170 and you get trucked by a dude that's 30 pounds heavier than you coming at you with the force of a truck, yeah, I'm going to be a little bit concerned that your ribs might break. But I do think that the pros of Xavier Worthy's game outweigh the cons, and the pros being how good he is as a route runner, how versatile he is, where you can line him up. Do you want him to go deep? Do you want him to go across the field? Do you want to use him as a decoy? You have a huge amount of benefits with drafting this guy, at least in my opinion. And that's why I think whether you're worried about his frame or not, we've seen undersized guys or guys that don't have that big frame be fine, or guys that even if they get banged up, they're able to play through it. And this RJ comment, where I don't know if this dude's going to be Tyreek Hill, but if you compare pure speed along with solid route running, you have Hill. It's a point to be made that you can get that upside from a guy like this, which is why
he's a better route runner than Tyreek Hill was coming out of college. I just want to say that, like, Tyreek Hill evolved his game and worked to be a better route runner. Worthy's already a better route runner than Hill is at this point in their career. Tyreek Hill is obviously a better route runner if we're all things equal right now, but Worthy's ahead of Hill in terms of timeline and trajectory right now. Sorry, continue.
No, it's all good. And I mean, the bottom line on this Worthy talk, Brian Thomas, Lad McConkey, is they had great days. I honestly was very impressed with BTJ. I knew he, again, like you said, he'd be good. I knew he'd run fast. I knew he'd have all those intangibles, but it's making me want to look at him more because maybe I was too presumptuous and I could see the upside. I have one more name because you mentioned it earlier. That's AD Mitchell. Again, another guy that I'm not like terribly high on, but he had a great day. And I mean, he measured in, he was big. I think it was at 6'2" when he ran a 4.35. So something along those lines, or do I have that number right? I believe that number right.
Yeah, he weighed in. Yeah, 6'2", 205 pounds, and he ran a 4.35.
So, like, again, it's kind of my same thing with BTJ. Like, this guy just really tested well, showed his athleticism. I think, I was laughing at some of the comments in our chat about, like, the fact that he admitted that he doesn't run full speed all the time.
Yeah, I don't know if he meant that as like a pacing or deception thing, or like it didn't come up good though.
Did not come up good at all, because when you have that frame and you have that speed and you have, the weight to match your height, like, why? You know what I mean? Imagine being able to sell your route effectively because people respect the size and speed and athleticism. Mm-hmm. And then you're talking about, no, I'm just going to kind of like, if I know that it's not for me, just kind of chill and let the other guys handle it. Like when you say it like that, I don't think he meant it that way. I think it just was one of those things. Like, I do this all the time. I mean to say something that sounds eloquent and great and has a great point, and it comes off absolutely effing horrible. Yeah, it probably was that, but he impressed me. I'll give him his credit. I think AD Mitchell is going to be on a lot of people's radars. I mean, any final thoughts on him before we move on to the other positions?
Yeah, I've been a bit higher on him throughout the process than I think most have, just based off of what I'm seeing. And again, a lot of it is the athleticism, how smooth he is, how fluid he is. And you and I were talking about this offline too. Like, even there's times when he is putting effort in his routes, but he's so smooth that it just looks lazy. And what's wild is what I'll do a lot, because it's such a fun juxtaposition to have him and Xavier Worthy on the field at the same time, because they're different players and different receivers. But you watch them both take off from the line of scrimmage, and Worthy is going 100 miles an hour off the line. And Mitchell looks like he's running at 5%, but they're both at the same distance. Like they're both with kind of in lockstep. So it means like Mitchell's not coasting. He's just so smooth and so fluid. The flexibility I really like in his lower body, and it's the explosion. He'll run an in-breaker or a slant. And again, the stem is just whatever. Like he looks like he's lollygagging, and then he puts his foot in the ground. And I've said it's almost like a recoil. Like you can just watch the weight transfer. It looks like a hitter in the batter's box. You can watch the weight transfer from the feet all the way through the hips to the upper body, the way he just snaps and explodes out. Like he can create like 3 to 5 yards of separation just off of like putting his foot in the ground and coming out of a break on a slant or an in-breaker. And then you watch him play big at the catch point and the ball tracking, the hands, the catch radius, like how explosive he is, all of it together. He's another one who I put in that category with the Brian Thomas of you've got a lot of traits. You've got to clean some things up with how you play the game. And again, if your pacing is so important from a quarterback timing perspective, from a route pacing or route spacing perspective, like you can't just be out there kind of doing whatever you want. But again, with how Texas operates, maybe that's not what was happening. Maybe like that's how he was coached to play, or how he's playing was understood. So maybe it's not as bad as it sounds. But if he cleans up some of the wasted movement and runs with a bit more deception based on how he attacks corners, I mean, the traits are there. The skill set is there. He's been a high dude for me all year. I've had him ahead of a lot of other guys that people have liked. So again, he crushed the combine. We'll see how he does the interviews. The interview process is going to be
off to a
important.
great start, by the way.
And that's the thing, right? If he's still there, like middle of round 2, that means interviews went bad. Because from the tape and the traits, he's a dude that could realistically creep into the first round already, and especially after the combine. So if he's fallen a little bit, that means the interviews went no bueno.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a tell, too, if you see where he gets drafted. Like, if Kansas City gets their hands on him, you know he nailed the interview, and they love his traits, and they want to develop him. I don't want to put that evil into the universe, but the realistic possibility is they're getting one of these guys, so pick your poison.
Too, like, some people don't care about the character stuff. Like, I'm not trying to harp on this too much, but, like, Kansas City knew that Tyreek Hill assaulted his pregnant baby mom, like, in college, and that's why he got kicked off the football team. They knew Frank Clark got kicked off the Michigan football team for like what he did to his girlfriend at a hotel. Like, some teams think the juice is worth the squeeze, or they have a culture that can bring those dudes in and not have it be bad or not poison the well. It also helps too when you're winning, because then those dudes are usually fine. It's when things go bad that those dudes end up being a problem. But sometimes teams don't care. And then they'll just be like, you know what, screw it. We'll make the talent work, and we'll figure out the personality stuff along the way.
Yeah. And before we pivot over to the next position group, breaking reaction to the 16-foot bison outside the new Highmark Stadium.
Stoked.
Yeah. If people are mad that they're not taller, I don't really know what to tell you, dude. That's 16 feet of pure buffalo mass right there. Like, I'm good with that. I don't think they need to be any bigger. Also, it's about the stadium. It's not about the buffalo. 16 foot feels generous. I'm totally cool with it. So that's that. Oh boy. This is it's not a rated G show. I curse all the time.
Steve said 60 feet or bust. I like that. Yeah. Like, what bigger buffalo?
You want this thing the size of like the Eiffel Tower is probably, it is way taller.
It should have been the height of the stadium. It should be equal. The height of the buffalo should match the height of the stadium.
Yes, we should do like what Denver does with the airport, where they have the demonic horse outside of it with the glowing eyes, but terrifying. A 300-foot tall buffalo with glowing red eyes that faces the stadium. Because then how is the opposition going to be able to play football when the biggest buffalo, the demonic buffalo, is staring you down? I think that would definitely be intimidating.
Steve says put the field in a buffalo. I like that. Shape I like that.
Oh my God, this is going so off the rails, but like I'm picturing like a Super Mario Strikers soccer field where, you know how they like in Mario games, they always have like the most gaudy, like insane backdrop for the place you play in any sports game. I could totally picture like a buffalo, and then you go through the eye and there's a football field in it. Okay. We're getting back to the conversation, but guys, I appreciate everyone watching. Again, we got a great crowd tonight. Please drop a like on this video if you could be so kind. We are going to talk about defense. We are going to talk about some of the biggest defensive standouts and then some honorable mentions before we close it up for the night. But before we do this, Anthony, there's this thing that I really want to tell this really, really large crowd about. But rather than you tell them about it, I think Greg and Aaron should be the ones to do it. In fact, I have them on the other line right now. Gentlemen, what do you got?
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes, become one today. For 60 gold doubloons, you could become a One Pass member. It is an awesome subscription. You get access to the premium Slack channel and engage with some really cool, like-minded Bills fans. It is literally nonstop discussion, and it's a ton of fun to join in. But you also get access to some cool perks, and also that Cover One Pass is the lifeblood of the network. It helps us do all the things we like to do, get all the resources we can get to pull up data, to pull up the film, all the things that help make these shows great. And we are doing a giveaway. If you are the lucky person that signs up, you could win some awesome prizes, including a PS5. That is one of the prizes you could win. I am not lying. Go check Greg's Twitter. It is. I am not lying. I would not lie about something like that. So if you are interested, it is $60. Sign up. I encourage you. You get direct access to, again, the content creators, other great Bills fans, and some awesome insider info. Thank you guys so much again for being here and for subscribing in advance. If you like gaming, like God of War, this is your chance. Go for it. All right. And I'm going to merge defensive tackle, edge, just call it D-line. I had him separated, but let's just call it D-line. I want to hear some of your favorites. I want to hear some of the guys that impressed you and then guys that you maybe weren't impressed by.
Start on the interior. There's so much of this defensive tackle class, like aside from Byron Murphy and then Johnny Newton, that was an awesome comment from Pete. I commented.
Yeah, I had to pull that up too. That's so good.
Aside from Byron Murphy from Texas and Johnny Newton from Illinois, there really isn't like a true 3-down defensive tackle. I mean, depending on what position you're looking at, there can be like Chris Jenkins offers you some of that a little bit, and Rook offers you that a little bit. But a lot of these dudes in the defensive line on the interior, first round caliber, it's Newton and it's Murphy, and then everyone else is really like second round guys, third round guys, some day 3 guys, rotational dudes. You know, some overall guys that can play all 3 downs, but the upside isn't necessarily there, or guys that are more siloed. Like I like Chris Jenkins from Michigan. He's more of a 3-tech as he is opposed to like being able to play a 1-tech or being able to play both. So as you go forward, there's more like siloed and more positional kind of niche or more rotational guys. Like, hey, this guy's really good. Yeah, but he's probably like a defensive tackle 3 or defensive tackle 4. But that being said, I'll start with the Clemson dudes. Somebody who I like Tyler Davis. I liked him at the Senior Bowl just with his motor and how he moves. Came in, measured 6'2", 300 pounds, ran a 5.02 40, which is really good for a dude that can play some 1-tech, can play some 3, can do a bunch of stuff. Again, the motor is always running with him. And then you've got his running mate. You know, I'll take the bullet for us here, Joe. I know that you're going to talk about as well. But then Rook or Horo, his other partner at Clemson there, ran a 4.9 40.
Yeah.
We saw him moving. Came in at 294 pounds. What's tough on tape for them is they do a lot of games. Like they do a lot of stunts between each other, or like they're crashing and they're looping an edge. So there's not a ton of reps where you're getting true one-on-one with the guy in front of you. Like, okay, how do they penetrate? How do they one gap? Because it's a very game-oriented front with how they work. So to see them perform well at the Combine, I thought it was a really nice boon and a really nice feather in their cap. I won't go too much into Braden Fisk. I know that's a guy for you, but him coming in at a 4.7 was tremendous. And then even some of the other guys, like seeing how Byron Murphy moved, he was already up there for me, but seeing him come in at a 4.88 and just how he performed in drills and knowing where he's probably going, but the effort he put in and how he came out, like, man, I just thought he really shined along the interior. And, you know, I'll stick it for there now as we go forward.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Fisk, and I'm also glad you took the name bullet on that one. He, it's a tough name to pronounce, but I was very, very pleased with.
I'm just going to say Rook throughout the entire
yeah
offseason, and people will know who we're talking about.
Yeah, I watched him and I was like, man, this dude can freaking move. And I think that's a valid point about the fact that they played a lot of stunts. But I think his athleticism, his explosiveness, his speed could transition well into the pro level. It's more just like you want to see more out of it. But again, if you think that those traits are there, he's a guy worth taking. Byron Murphy, it pains me to put him on this list because it's not. He's going to be gone, dude.
No
he's going to be gone. And
they probably they might have a shot at Newton, but there is positional redundancy with Ed Oliver. But also part of me says positional redundancy be damned. He's awesome and figure it out after.
That's exactly it for me. It does matter in a sense that you don't want to have too much of the same guy. But if you're talking about like, well, if we drafted this kid and you build a rotation where you just have two really menacing pass rushers, albeit not the biggest guy in the world, like, I don't care. I really don't care. Let's get creative. Let's mix things around. Let's make some fun packages with this D-line where we could have two of the same position and they're both eating. It could be a lot of fun, or it could fail miserably. We won't know because he's probably not going to be there. But you bring up Fisk. Fisk is a guy that, again, he's not the biggest guy in the world, but my God, man. I mean, that's talk about showing out at the combine. He's got speed. He's got the explosiveness. He's got the ability, like everything that you wanted him to test. He did it in stride. I was watching him with my jaw on the floor, and he's someone that I don't know where the hell he's going to go. If he's top 50, if he's top 75, I think he probably bumped his stock up significantly, even though I'm one of those believers that RAS score only matters so much. The combine only matters so much. It's great to base off of. It's great to have an athletic profile. But like we saw with the safety that didn't test well that we can talk about down the road, I think you know who I'm talking about. I don't give a damn because what you see them play on tape is probably night and day difference. And it's just someone not testing well. We've taken math tests in high school. Well, I've taken math tests in high school. I'm not going to assume you were bad at math, Ant, but I'm terrible at math. I did not test well. But I'm pretty good with numbers if I'm not under pressure. And I think the same thing could be said for guys when they have to test in a physical test. You might just not have a good day. So I don't try to put too much stock into it. But I will say that Fisk's was so good, you have to look at him and say, if he's there in the second round, or even if he somehow slips or in trade-up range in the third round, this is a guy I could see just being a fill-in, move around the D-line. Again, not the biggest guy in the world, so I don't think he's going to be the person to take the torch from Daquan Jones down the road, but he's someone that is explosive enough where if you're putting him in a rotation, I have so much faith in this guy being a very stout, solid pass rusher, high motor guy that can really stop and interfere with the run, someone that I think they should take. And my other names on this list, Ant, were Murphy, Rook, and Chris Jenkins. So, I mean, even though Chris Jenkins didn't have the craziest test, I think I just like him as a prospect, and I'm excited to watch more of him. So as far as, D-line, interior D-line, those are my guys. But I want to hear more about your edge rushers, because there's one guy, I watched your show last week, or I think it might have been 2 weeks ago. You talked about him, and you weren't, I don't want to say you weren't the biggest fan, but you were kind of like iffy on him.
Chop Robinson?
It's Chop Robinson. And I have him on my list because I thought he tested well. I mean, what do you think about him and the rest of these edge rushers?
He did what I thought he would do. Like, not to downplay it, but I thought he would test well. You just watch him play. Like, he's got some really impressive snaps, especially from like a get off and a juice standpoint. There's a couple, I think the most recent one that I clipped of him against Rutgers, I think it is. It's a run play, and the ball is snapped, and he's gone. And he's in the backfield, like, as the quarterback is handing it off to the running back. Like, his get off and his juice are very, very real. And he's somebody I think who needed to have a good combine because he's the type of guy, like, similar to some of the wide receivers we talked about earlier. He's more of that traits-based guy that you're hoping you can coach up. Like, the pass rush plan, moves, arsenal necessarily isn't always there. But you can't teach that speed. You can't teach that juice. You can't teach that athleticism and that bend. So you kind of take him and you're thinking, okay, this guy's traits up. We can coach him up. Some team is going to bank and buy in on those traits. And I do understand it given how impressive they are. And the fact, that he ran that 4.4 and he did it at, 250 pounds is good for him. Actually, yeah, and I'm waiting for, he ran that 4.48, like, which was nice for him to do it at that, like, weight. I do wonder if he has to bulk up a little bit. Like that 250, I don't know how it plays in the NFL, like if he has to go up a little bit more, but I mean, I expected him to test well, and I don't love the tape. I can see why some do because the traits are there. It's just hard for me to, It might also just be because Aaron Maben worked out so horribly for the Bills, but like I get scared. Actually, you know what? No, and I said it on my show. I think like because Odafe Owe was like that, and I really liked him coming out of Penn State, even though he had no sacks his last year at Penn State. But you saw more of the moveset, you saw the understanding, and I think the upside is there for Chop. It just scares me as to what the floor is because you're banking so much on the traits and then coaching somebody up. Granted, his get off is so real to the point that he might fall backwards into like 5 sacks as a rookie just because he's going to come off the edge screaming, or he's going to make some tackles for loss and stops just because he's so great coming off that edge.
Yeah, and if you fortify the interior D-line and free agency in the draft too, I mean, if you're talking about bringing Daquan Jones back and having Ed Oliver and creating some press up the middle, especially with how often they're going to bring pressure, that could benefit it because maybe there's no immediate, I don't want to say no immediate pressure because I think if you're taking an edge in the first round, there's pressure because they're obviously pulling you into a spot where you're going to be your starter of the future. But I could see it more as like you said, his get off is so explosive and so real that could be just something that helps him immediately because there might already be so much pressure in the interior that maybe he gets flushed to his side and he's getting gifts. And if that's the case, that'd be a lot of fun. But I understand that. This was a name I was going to get to, but like there's names I have on here like Darius Robinson is a mammoth of a human being, and he's a lot of fun. That's the one
too. Like if we're talking, I know Chop is sexier, but if we're talking scheme fit and archetype fit, it's Darius Robinson all day. Chop is very much like not in the ballpark of what they look for at edge.
Right. And Darius Robinson's versatility is something that sold me on him big time because dude's 6'5", he's fast, he's physical, a great athletic profile. But I mean, the fact that you can move him around the line and not in like a gimmicky way, almost like he's comfortable playing interior in addition to being an edge rusher. Like if this guy's there at 28, it's going to be hard for me to say no to that because if they brought him in, I would see the vision. And you're almost, I don't want to say you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone because he's going to have to be moved around and you'll probably have him playing a lot of edge. But like, imagine Daquan Jones comes off the field and you let this guy sit in on a pass rush package that has, ideally a healthier and better Von Miller and Gregory Rousseau and Ed Oliver. Like this is a guy I could see them having a lot of fun with and valuing their versatility. And also one of the many defensive names that if they took him at 28, the fans will be angry. Twitter will be an apocalyptic hellhole for 2 days and I will laugh. But that's one name. But the other name I wanted to mention, he's a name I really like. I know size is a concern, but I think given where he might drop in this draft, it's a name that I don't think you're going to bank on being a premier edge rusher as far as a rotational, or at least I think he'll be a rotational. Mo Kamara.
I knew it. I was going to guess.
You knew where I was going with it, bro. But like Mo Kamara, I love this dude. I think this dude, like, again, when you talk about what you've seen from him as far as get off the line and his explosiveness and like his hunt, it's not a term anyone uses, but the way he hunts, like that is something to me that I find so valuable for a D-line. You want to be aggressive. And again, when you talk about an edge rusher that's going to fill into a pressure heavy defense with Sean McDermott, younger guys that are going to coach these guys up. I know he's undersized, but God, I could see this dude being an absolute monster. And we've seen undersized pass rushers have success. So I'm there's names on here, but I had to bring up Kamara. Like I just had to. I love him.
He's one who he flashed for me. I think it was during the game against Colorado earlier this year, like when I was watching it actually on TV. Yeah, because Colorado State, their head coach was the one who talked all that smack about Deion.
Played him tough, though.
Yeah, that game went to overtime. Like it was super physical, super intense. That Colorado State safety took like a cheap shot at the one dude from Colorado, knocked him out of the game. Beside the point. But Kamara was all over that game, like penetrating, causing havoc, just being a force. And then comes in, runs. What I think he ran, didn't he put in like a 4.58 in his 40, which is just, again, you would hope that he does that because he's coming in at like sub 250, but he moves. I watched one game of his so far, and I'm gonna end up going back just because of how we tested. But that undersized piece is there, but we've seen small guys like work before. And now again, you're always gonna have to work on that pass rush plan and the moves and all the pieces that go along with it. But the explosiveness and the excitement is really there. And you could do worse as like a day 3 dude. Like he's a day 3 guy I have my eye on. Not necessarily for the Bills, but just overall. Jasheen Davis is another dude from Wake Forest whose tape that I like. I like dudes that play defensive line like Velociraptors, and Davis does that. And Darius Robinson too, just to go back to that point, like I tweeted it last week. I really could see that being the pick at 28. If he had a really good combine, I thought it would jettison him ahead of pick 28 and he would get taken. Like him running a sub 540 I didn't really care too much about because, he's 6'5", 285 pounds. Like, I think there are concerns for his 3-cone and change of direction and stuff like that. I don't think he ran the 3-cone, but like you watch him on tape and like you can see change of direction maybe being an issue, but then you watch him also kind of break down and run down Jaden Daniels against LSU. And you're like, oh, okay, like maybe not. Like, I think the more important thing to look at with him is he is a scheme fit. He is an archetype fit. And for a defense that wants to play with light boxes, and who has 2 starting linebackers that are undersized in Matt Milano and especially Terrell Bernard, having your bookends on the edge be Darius Robinson and Greg Rousseau, you're going to have 2. Greg Rousseau is already one of the best run defending edges in all of football. Robinson, because of what he played in at Missouri, playing in that 3-3-5, where he's lining up everywhere. Sometimes he's at a 4-eye, sometimes 4, sometimes he's an edge, sometimes he's at the interior. Like, he plays the run. He plays it viciously and angrily. He's got the arm length to go with it. Like, he's very much in that group mold. I think he would go a long way towards helping keep Bernard and Milano clean and go towards the schematic fit that the Bills are looking for. Again, in addition to the archetype that Bean and McDermott have gone for at edge, but he's one that I kind of almost wanted him to test a little bad because I would like him to be there at 28 because he fits the need and his skill set and traits just fit with what they're doing. And he still has upside playing it more at a traditional edge spot other than like how Missouri used him.
Right. And I can't get off the fact that you can move him around. I think that's just my biggest thing is like, you're talking about the need for edge. You're talking about the need for DT. Obviously, this guy can't be in 2 places at once, but how nice would it be to just have like the Swiss Army utility D lineman, except he's actually good and can start and be on the field, most of the time. That's something that's a very big sell for me. And if at 28 they went for him, even if there's receiver, safety, whatever, and I know we've had so many conversations about the big board and positional value, but if he's there and you chose him over like, and people are going to crucify me for saying this, but like Franklin or Worthy or something, I would understand it. I would get it. Would I be over the moon? Maybe not, because I really do want them to get a receiver, but I would get it. And I'd be excited for this guy. And
I would take him over Troy Franklin every single day of the week at pick 28. If they were both there, it's not even close to me. Worthy is, I think, a bit of a different conversation. But again, it's also the drop-off, right? Like, the getting Robinson in the first round versus the edge you can get in round 2, it's a bigger gap than the wide receiver you can get at 28 versus the wide receiver you can get in round 2. Like, the strength of this wide receiver class is rounds 2 and round 3. I know how good Neighbors and Odunze and Marvin Harrison Jr. are, but the strength of this wide receiver class is rounds 2 and round 3. Like, and that's what affords you the ability to go defensive line or safety or whatever in round 1, because rounds 2 and 3 are going to be loaded with wide receivers, especially round 2.
Yeah. And everyone's talking about, well, that potential trade up in the first because they got this pick. Like, that's the speculation. How about the potential trade up in the second? Like, that to me seems a little more realistic than a first round trade up, because you're talking about maybe they want to go defense in the first round because they like Robinson, or they like Chop or Darius, because they can't say Robinson.
Right. No, just say Robinson. That way, if they take one, you can come back and be like, see, I was right. I told you guys they love Robinson.
Well, hey, I did say both names. So, hey, let's do the takeover again in case I got to clip this off. Hang on. I could see them taking Robinson in the first round. Okay, anyways, the only other names I had on here were Marshawn Nealon and Jalix Hunt. Do you have any thoughts on these two before we press on to secondary?
So Nealon is someone, for me, he's kind of like, actually even worse than like Malachi Corley. Like, he's kind of like the Malachi Corley of defense for me, where like I haven't gotten the tape that I wanted for that person. Like, I've seen some of Corley, but it wasn't enough for me to like give a full evaluation. I saw him at the Senior Bowl, which is very helpful. Like, that's really what I'm hanging my hat on from an evaluation standpoint, but I want to see the tape. Like, I've really stayed away from a lot of Malachi Corley stuff. Someone will come and like ask me, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't have a complete evaluation yet. I don't know. Nealon, I haven't seen any tape. I know there are people that I respect who like him, and he tested well, and he measures well, and he fits a lot of prototypical stuff off the edge. I am hopefully getting some tape soon. I'll definitely have him before draft time, but he's a name that like I really hope, with how much work I'm putting in to try and get tape, that when I watch it, it doesn't suck, because I'm going to be so upset with how much effort I put into trying getting this tape. But that'll be interesting. And then same thing with Hunt. Like, I haven't watched enough on him yet to have a full evaluation, but based on the excitement that I'm seeing and some of the buzz, I'm excited to finally get there, but I'm not in a spot right now to kind of evaluate either guy, other than just, performing well at the combine.
Yeah, and that's what I'm, this list for me is who performed well at the combine. There's a lot more I need to watch of a lot of these players because I did a whole lot of receiver watching, and I'm annoying and I go position by position. So what I know about a lot of the safeties and linemen came from either draft Twitter, you literally like people that have cut clips up, and I'm just like, well, I see this and I love this highlight, but obviously I got to watch it more extensively. But based on their combine performances, was very impressed with, and their profile makes it work for me. So I am excited to watch them. I just got to wait. Where is this comment I just saw? This one, I thought this was a good question. Do you think the fact, and we will get to safeties and I do plan that, but do you guys think the fact that teams are playing 2 high safeties changes the qualities you look for in a wide receiver? So, Ant, I'm gonna let you go with this one. What do you think about this?
I mean, just from the perspective of like, I want as complete a receiver as possible. And I think speed needs to be part of the profile to be able to take the top off of those defenses and threaten those safeties and those looks. I think the quality that I want more is I want a receiver opposite of Stephon Diggs that you don't feel comfortable playing one-on-one against, whether it's cover 1 or whether it's cover 3. Like, I want the defense to have to live in a 2-high world. And it's not from a pass perspective. It's from a run perspective. I want defenses to live in 2-high worlds with light boxes. And I want Josh Allen to turn around and hand the ball off to James Cook and run for 6 to 8 yards a pop and make Josh Allen's life super easy. And then you go play action and you gouge them with sail concepts and things over the middle and take advantage of Kincaid and whatever kind of matchups you want. So it changes it to a degree for me, just basically like I want a true receiver that can win one-on-one to the point where you can't play single coverage because you're like, oh, well, we can't leave our corner 2 on an island against that guy because he actually can win that one-on-one matchup. Or it's like, we can't move our corner 1 over there because we need our corner 1 on the trip side where Diggs, Kincaid, and Shakir are. So I just want enough of a skill set, a complete wide receiver 2 skill set that when you put them on that side one-on-one, it makes defenses go, crap, we can't do that. We have to stay in 2 high. I know you want explosives, and when teams play 2 high, you can still stretch that out. And maybe you're not beating them over the top. I mean, you can if you have a dude who's such a burner, but I want to stretch that 2 high coverage out, and I want to beat them in the intermediate and gouge them with 15 and 20-yard passes or 12-yard gashes over and over again, and then run the ball and generate explosives on the ground.
And that's why I think when we talk about the combine and we talk about the draft evaluation process and guys we see that are so touted because maybe, oh, he's 6'4", 2, whatever. I think its size it matters a lot. It does, because when you talk about the role this person could play in your offense, you do have to take into account their physical traits. But I think it's important that people don't cripple themselves with it either, because I think we box ourselves into a lot of discussion about, well, this guy ended up being 6'1" and not 6'3", or like this guy plays, I can't even explain it, but I think a lot about how the Bills' philosophy has been on the defense and how it could be on the offense, where they just want people that play above their frame. And when I look at that in, relevance to whether you want to talk about Malachi Corley, if you've watched him, or Xavier Worthy or Ladd McConkey, these receivers where they might not have the size, but you're looking at a complete profile. To me, that matters infinitely more, because if you're talking about how defenses are trying to match you up, this guy can still have all those traits, even if he's not 6'5". Sure, he might not be a size mismatch, but this guy's release, the explosion, the ability to get off the line in a hurry, the ability to beat you in a multitude of ways because their route tree is defined and they're very good at running it. That should matter more than just the raw athletic stuff. And while I do value it, and we're doing a whole freaking episode on the combine standouts and who tested well, I do think it is important that when we look at receivers or look at any draft prospect, don't suffer from paralysis by analysis of the fact that the dude might be an inch shorter than you thought. And I think, a great example of someone who got crucified for this was Xavier Legette, who I think people thought was like 6'3", and he ended up being 6'1". Legette definitely, and I'm not even the biggest fan of him, but he definitely plays above his frame. And he definitely has that ability to almost be a size mismatch without having it. So I think
you should care about with
that
wide receiver spot, they just got to win one-on-one. However they can win one-on-one, it could be because they're huge and they can dunk on dudes. It could be like Ladd McConkey because they have speed and route running. It could be just pure speed. It could be a combination of everything. You just need someone that can win those one-on-ones. You need them to be a one-on-one threat and have some aspect to their game where they can consistently beat it. Exactly to your point. And it'd be nice if you had someone like, man, we got Calvin Johnson. He can win with speed. He can win with route running. He can win with size. Oh, man. But, don't get turned off from, yeah, but Ladd McConkey's like under 6 feet. Who cares? He can beat anybody one-on-one because of his route running. He just wins. Like, you don't have to necessarily have that profile that you're looking for. You just need to see how this person wins on tape. And if them winning in that way is able to be translated into the NFL and replicated in the NFL. And if so, how quickly?
You know, Ant, as someone who myself, I'm 5'10 and a quarter, which basically means I'm 5'11, which basically means I'm 6 foot. I can confirm that you don't have to be 6 foot to be successful in this life. Short kings, we can survive on our own. And now let's transition to the final one, Ant. I want to give you time before you go live because, guys, which way should I put my arms? Ant's show is right after mine. And I implore you all to stay on YouTube or whatever browser you're on to watch it, because if you want to hear more of his insight, which is incredible, then you can immediately after this show ends on Cover One's YouTube. But Ant, let's talk about safety. There were a few names I got. And then if you want to also mix in some honorable mentions or positions that we didn't cover, feel free to. This is your time to shine. Let me hear what you got before we sign off.
Yeah, I'll start with the first one. Cam Kinchens tested poorly, which I thought he would not test well. I wasn't expecting him to test as poorly as he did, but I don't really care because of how good the tape is. Like, I just don't. Like, I've been watching him. I've watched pretty much every snap of his from a broadcast perspective for the last 2 years. I've watched probably 8 or 9 games of him on tape between watching Miami's defense last year for Tyreek Stevenson, and then watching Miami's defense this year for him and James Williams and Leonard Taylor and stuff. So I just think Kitchens is the real deal when it comes to that safety perspective with the scheme versatility, how fast he plays, how he triggers. Like, my biggest worry for him is just how rogue he goes at times and he takes risks. It's also part of the reason why he's so productive from a ball hawking standpoint with like 11 career interceptions, 6 2 years ago, 5 this most recent year in 2023. So he'll put himself out of position at times because he is a bit of a risk taker with how he'll kind of jump stuff and let his eyes lead him to the ball. But dude doesn't play slow. He doesn't play like a 4.6 40 type of safety. He's fast. He's explosive on the field. And a lot of that is because of how he processes and how he triggers and the type of scheme that he played in. So start with him. Tyler Nubin is another safety who I really like. He and Kitchens are my top 2 safeties. He didn't run the 40, which I was a little disappointed in. Showed a bit of that hip tightness that worries me a little bit in his game, but I thought overall he performed well at the combine. And then someone who I really like, Jalen Simpson, safety from Auburn, weighed in at 179 pounds. He was a corner in every season for Auburn besides this past year, 1 year of safety at Auburn. But I just loved his tape so much. He's driving on Brock Bowers and running through Brock Bowers and punching through the ball. He's jumping Malik Neighbors and knocking the ball into the air and creating interceptions. Like, from a coverage standpoint, his range, his instincts, the way he sees the field are already strong. They should continue to get better because he's only had 1 year of starting safety experience. Now, again, the concern there is coming in at under 180 pounds. Can you get up a little bit to 180? How much does that athleticism or range start to deteriorate at all? And he's got to work on some run fit stuff, but he's a guy late, day 3, who I really, really like, round 4, round 5 safety, especially knowing what the Bills have gotten out of those dudes. His coverage instincts are so good, and the way he plays on that back end and the juice he plays with, he's honestly been one of my favorite tape studies through this entire process. He also had a really good Senior Bowl as well, which is kind of what keyed me into him initially. And then a couple other guys. Malik Mustafa is a safety from Wake Forest that I like. He didn't really participate in too much. Javon Bullard, safety from Georgia. He tested well. I think he helped his draft stock. And then there's a bunch of other, there's a lot of day 3 dudes or back end guys I like Sion Vaki and Kaiton Oladapo. So I thought the safety class did well for themselves, aside from the dudes at the top, like Nubin, who didn't run the 40, and then Kitchens, who, underperformed.
Yeah, I pretty much in agreement with you. Kitchens was, I was surprised to see him test so poorly, but anything I've seen of Kitchens reassures me. I mean, I think this dude is instinctive. I think this dude's physical. He does not look slow on tape. And by slow, I mean like game speed slow. And that's another thing that I kind of want to emphasize too. Game speed's different, bro. It's just entirely
different. Game
different.
speed is so tied to how you process and how, and there's so much, watch some of there's a couple really good ones of when Luke Kuechly is mic'd up. And granted, Luke Kuechly was explosive and a good athlete, but he's winning so quickly because he's processing and knows what's happening. You can be quote unquote slow from a time perspective, but play fast because of your mental ability. Similar to, not to knock anybody, Dorian Williams, super fast and athletic linebacker, didn't really be able to play all that fast in pass coverage because he's getting misled by misdirection and all the eye candy. So your physical speed is useless if you can't play fast mentally.
I didn't know we were going to get into a Tremaine Edmonds conversation, but I do think that
No, I'm done with Edmonds. Dorian Williams is the new one because apparently he's the second coming of Christ.
We've moved on from Tremaine. I wish you all the best, Tremaine. I hope you're doing well in Chicago. We love you. The only other safeties that I had on here that I thought tested well and looked really good, Cole Bishop was one. I liked him in the 40, and I liked him in some of those drills. He looked athletic. He looked fluid. Those are the things I think you're going to value. I haven't watched too much of him, so I'm not sure if he would be more of a box roll or if he's meant to play on the back end. But his report initially has been pretty good, and someone that I could see the value in either spot just from his athleticism.
With his combine testing, it gives you hope that he can play more on the back end. Based on watching him at Utah, more of like a nickel apex box type of safety kind of roamer in a variety of ways. And they will drop him deep. He'll play in split field looks or play as a post safety at times. But with him running that 40, it gave me more hope that he could be more of like a post safety and have that true range, even if I haven't necessarily seen it on tape that much.
Yeah, I mean, watching him in the open field drills, like that's what gave me the hope. I mean, if I again, a lot of people I still got to watch. So with him, my impression was that this guy was more of a free post guy. Like that's where I thought he would be. I guess if it's not a part of his game, it could absolutely be developed. And I mean, the Utah report with Kincaid on your roster could matter to them, might value his input. I don't know. I could be totally wrong. And the other one I had was Dadrian Taylor Demerson. And I'm a little biased on this because I actually had a dude I grew up with who went to Texas Tech and played on the same time as him. So he knows him personally and he spoke very highly of him, but he tested really well. And it's more of those same traits to me. Again, looked athletic, looked fluid, looked like, I think it was him who made a really nice catch. Granted, I thought he kind of botched the drill a little bit.
When he fell down and he
made that shoe grab. I was like, I think they're all like, that's a great catch. I was like, I don't know if that was supposed to be that. I think he kind of ran a little too far or tripped, but nonetheless, great catch. And for me, I was like, I'm impressed by some of these guys. I do think that late round safety is going to be in play for them no matter what they do. So seeing someone like Bishop, I don't know if Bishop will go higher, but Demerson kind of in that day 3 range. Those are guys that I do think that could be on the radar. And listen, I don't care who it is. I don't care what they play. If they could be molded into being someone that could either stack the box well or someone that you could see as being more of a post safety, sign me up. And if it's Kinchins because he tested poorly and all of you GMs wanted to pass on him, sign him. All right. And your show's coming up soon. I want to give you the time to reset and shuffle before, you have to go live. So any final thoughts, any other standouts, anything you want to say to the people before we say goodnight?
No, I think we hit on a lot, and I think it's just the tip of the iceberg for the conversation really going forward. Like there's so much to discuss, and all of it really gets set starting next week with legal tampering starting on Monday, and then free agency really kicking off officially, quote unquote, Wednesday, even though Monday and Tuesday we'll get so much news flooding in about who's signing where. But that's really like the first dominoes that come in, and a lot of the conversations we've been having might get more intense based on what free agency does, or they might become completely irrelevant because of what they do in free agency. And I think that's the huge piece to kind of take with all of this is so many dominoes start to fall once free agency happens. And then that's where, like you said earlier, like the real work begins. There's all these, if-then scenarios, and they all start with what happens at free agency. So next week is going to be a very, very, very big week for this Buffalo Bills team and everyone in the NFL in general, but especially with the Bills, given what they need and some of their financial limitations that they have in addressing those needs.
An absolutely cerebral part of all of our discussion and our hopes and ideas of direction of this team is starting literally in next week, which is crazy to think about because it feels like a month away for me. But I'm really excited to watch it. My expectations are tempered. I'm not going over the moon and saying they should sign this, that, and then. It's going to be kind of like a bargain bin Goodwill style free agency. But hey, I've gotten some awesome clothes thrift shopping, and I think Brandon Beane's gotten some awesome players thrift shopping. So if that's how it's got to be with maybe a splurge here and there, so be it. But that, at least to me, is going to be huge because, like you said, it's going to tell us so much, at least of whether they're trying to allocate more assets into one place to make the draft a little less pressuring, or if they want to have a nice even-keeled approach and make it so that there isn't truly a super immediate need, but rather allowing yourself to find the best player available. We're going to see in the coming weeks. It's going to be a lot of fun. And next week, if you guys tune in, I will be going over everything we've heard so far. I hope it's exciting. I really hope we have like a million things to talk about for the Buffalo Bills.
Bro, because it sucks when you don't, when it's been dead and you're just like, Oh, well,
I'm
nothing happened.
I signed up for the Tuesday night slot only to find out that the league here starts on a Wednesday. And if there isn't moves to be made until Wednesday, then oh no. But no, in all seriousness, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Again, Disguise coverage is on in literally 10 minutes. And where can they find you on Twitter, and what should they know about you before we go?
Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2 ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter. I am the host of Disguise Coverage, live every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, and then one of the co-hosts of the Cover One Film Room with Eric Turner, live every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Appreciate you, RJ. Yeah, see you in 10 minutes. Tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, I got JP Acosta from SB Nation,
hell yeah,
who I
love
love.
JP.
Yeah, he's awesome. We're just doing full wide receiver stuff, tiers, rankings, player evaluations, how the combine impacted stuff. Just a whole discussion about that position grouping based on how eventful the combine was, how important it is to the Bills. So we'll be diving into that piece. And yeah, he's awesome. I'm pumped for it.
I'm literally going to be watching the show while I'm doing all my post-show stuff. Like, I'm going to be eating a rice bowl and then just checking it out. So you guys should all do the same. Again, 900 or something of you, which is crazy. This is I don't even know how, but this is so cool. Like, and I'm so appreciative of everyone for tuning in. So thank you so much for being here. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. I tweet about football. I also tweet about absolute nonsense. You guys were great. We'll be back next week to go over some of the exciting news in the NFL landscape. But for tonight, I want to say thank you. I appreciate you, and go Bills. We will see you soon.